The morning it happened didn't feel unusual at all. The sun was barely rising. The apartment was still wrapped in that quiet, pale dawn light, and Emily Hart was moving through her small kitchen the way she did every weekday morning, slowly, carefully, almost mechanically. She brewed coffee, toasted bread, packed her daughter's lunch, a routine she clung to like a lifeline. Nothing about the morning warned her that her life was about to split in two. She heard the familiar heavy footsteps before she saw him. Daniel, her husband of 12 years, a man who once made promises about forever, but now carried a bitterness in his voice that could cut through steel. He entered the kitchen like he owned the space, like every wall, every tile, every breath belonged to him. Emily felt her shoulders stiffen. They had been distant for months long, cold months filled with arguments, silences, and broken expectations. But still, she didn't expect this. Daniel didn't bother with greetings. He threw a stack of papers on the kitchen table with a loud slap that echoed through the room. "There," he said flatly. "I'm filing for divorce." Emily froze. The toast burned in the toaster. The coffee dripped slowly into the pot. The entire world continued moving as if nothing had changed. But everything changed. She turned toward him slowly, hands trembling just enough for her to notice. Daniel crossed his arms, looking almost satisfied with the shock on her face. "A divorce?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Yeah," he said with a smirk. "It's done. I've already spoken to my lawyer." A harsh silence fell between them. Emily swallowed hard, trying to find something, anything, to hold on to. She had known things were bad, but she thought, maybe they could still fix it. Maybe the distance was temporary. Maybe he would remember the man he had once been, but he had already made his decision. What about Lily?" Emily asked softly. "We have a daughter, Daniel." He shrugged. "I'll take care of that. My lawyer says I have a strong case for primary custody." Emily felt her heart squeeze painfully in her chest. Primary custody? She had been the one caring for their daughter every day. She had been there for every school meeting, every fever, every nightmare. Daniel didn't even know the name of Lily's homeroom teacher. "You're taking her away from me?" Emily whispered, horrified. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Why not? I make the money. I can give her a better life." Emily stared at him, stunned. Money? Since when did money measure love? Since when did money replace a mother? She reached for the divorce papers with trembling hands. The dense paragraphs, the legal terminology, the formal tone, it all blurred together. She could barely focus. She felt like she was underwater, drowning in shock. "You expect me to sign this?" Daniel chuckled. Actually chuckled. "I expect you not to drag this out," he said. "You don't have a lawyer. You don't have money for one. So let's not pretend you're in any position to fight." Emily's stomach twisted. There it was, the truth behind the smirk, behind the cold voice. Daniel wasn't just ending the marriage. He wanted to win. He wanted control, power, satisfaction. This wasn't heartbreak. This was strategy. "You think you can walk into court alone?" he asked mockingly. "Without representation? Without knowing anything about family law? Good luck." He walked toward the door, adjusting his expensive watch. Emily's voice was barely audible. "Daniel, please, don't do this. Not like this." He paused, looked at her over his shoulder, and his lip curled in a cruel half-smile. "You should have thought about that years ago," he said, "but it's too late now." The door slammed behind him. The apartment seemed to shrink around her. Emily stood in the middle of the kitchen, clutching the divorce papers, tears she hadn't authorized slipping out. Her breath trembled. Her hands shook. She felt humiliated, blindsided, utterly alone. But beneath all that pain, something else stirred. A small, quiet spark. "He thinks I can't fight because I don't have a lawyer. He thinks I'm weak. He thinks he's already won." Emily sat at the table, slowly spreading out the papers. Page after page of demands, conditions, strategies designed to corner her. He had prepared everything. He had planned this. But for the first time that morning, she wasn't paralyzed. She felt something unfamiliar strength, anger, determination. Daniel believed she would break. Instead, she was beginning to wake up. She wiped her eyes, straightened her back, and whispered to herself, "If he wants a fight, he'll get one." She didn't know how. She didn't know where to begin. She didn't know what she would find or what she would uncover. But she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to walk into court defeated. Daniel could laugh now, but the day would come sooner than he ever expected, when he would be the one standing frozen. And Emily would be the one walking away stronger than she had ever been. The morning after Michael's announcement felt unreal to Emily. She woke before sunrise, not because she wanted to, but because sleep simply wouldn't stay. Her mind replayed every word he had said the night before, how casually he delivered the news, how he laughed, how he didn't even bother to hide the relief on his face. She found herself in the kitchen, staring at the coffee machine as if expecting it to tell her what to do next. The house was too quiet. Michael had already left for work. Of course he had. He wouldn't want to deal with the consequences of his own cruelty. And as for Lily, she would wake up soon, bright and hopeful, with no idea that her world was changing. Emily wrapped her hands around a warm mug even though she wasn't thirsty. She needed something to ground her, something to remind her she was still functioning and not just floating through a nightmare on autopilot. When she walked into the living room, she froze. There, spread neatly across the coffee table, was a thick envelope. Not tucked away, not hidden, but placed where she would immediately see it. Her stomach tightened. The very sight of it felt like a threat. With trembling fingers, she opened the flap. Inside were the divorce papers, and a handwritten note. "Sign when you're ready. I've already arranged everything." Arranged everything. The arrogance of it hit her like a slap, as though her entire life were a package he could reorganize on a whim, as though she were some powerless figure who would simply agree to whatever he decided. But she wasn't powerless. Not yet. She sank onto the couch, the weight of the papers pressing down on her palms. Her eyes scanned line after line division of assets, custody schedules, financial obligations. And the more she read, the more her pulse rose. He wanted full control of their house. He wanted joint custody, but with conditions that heavily favored him. He offered her barely anything in the settlement. And worst of all, he expected her to accept it. Emily's eyes stung, but she forced herself not to look away. This was her life on these pages, her future, Lily's future. As she reached the final page where her signature was meant to go, she felt her throat tighten. She imagined Michael smirking as he pictured her alone, unrepresented, forced to agree to terms he crafted in his favor. He assumed she would fold. He assumed she couldn't fight back, because she didn't have a lawyer. The thought echoed in her mind, repeating like an insult she refused to accept. Suddenly, soft footsteps came from the hall. "Mommy?" Lily's sleepy voice broke the stillness. The little girl padded into the room, rubbing her eyes with her pink pajama sleeve. "Why are you up so early?" Emily straightened her back, tucking the papers under a stack of magazines with a swift, instinctive movement. Not yet. She couldn't let Lily see her like this, not frightened, not uncertain. "I just woke up early, sweetheart." Emily managed a smile and brushed a strand of hair from Lily's face. "Do you want breakfast?" Lily nodded, but her eyes lingered on her mother with quiet curiosity. Children always sensed more than adults gave them credit for. As Emily prepared breakfast, she listened to Lily chatter about her upcoming school play, about the costume she wanted to wear, about how she hoped Daddy would come watch. Each innocent word struck her heart like a needle. Would he even bother? Would this divorce tear their daughter in half? Emily clenched the spatula so tightly her knuckles whitened. She wouldn't let him dictate their lives. She wouldn't let him treat Lily like an afterthought. And she wouldn't walk into that courtroom unprotected. Not anymore. Before she could overthink it, she wiped her hands on a towel, grabbed her phone, and stepped into the hallway. Her fingers shook as she scrolled through her contacts, finding the one name she had hoped she would never need. Her older sister, Rachel. If anyone knew what to do, it was her. Emily pressed call. It rang twice before a groggy voice picked up. "Em, it's 7 in the morning. Is everything okay?" The moment Emily opened her mouth, her voice cracked. No, Michael, he gave me divorce papers. Silence. Then a sharp inhale from the other end. He what? Emily explained everything. The words pouring out in bursts, his coldness, the papers, his taunting laughter. When she finished, she felt emptied out, like she had been holding her breath for hours. Rachel's voice was firm now, awake and focused. Okay, first things first. You are not signing anything. Do you hear me? Emily nodded, even though her sister couldn't see her. I don't have a lawyer, Rach. Then we'll find one, Rachel said immediately. I know someone, a good one. She handled my coworker's custody case last year. Trust me, she'll take care of you. Emily felt her chest loosen, just a little. Thank you, she whispered, tears finally threatening to spill. I don't know what I'm doing. You don't have to know, Rachel replied softly. You just have to stop letting him control the narrative. Control. That was exactly what Michael wanted. But he wasn't going to get it. Not anymore. As Emily ended the call and returned to the kitchen, she felt something she hadn't felt since last night. Strength. Michael's assumptions were wrong. She wasn't alone, and she wasn't going to let him walk all over her. Not in this house. Not in front of her daughter. Not in that courtroom. Not ever again. Emily woke up the next morning with the uneasy feeling of someone who'd stepped onto a moving train without knowing its destination. For weeks, she had lived in a haze pain, stress, legal confusion, but now there was a sharpness in her mind she hadn't felt in months. She replayed everything Mr. Grant had told her the night before. You have more leverage than you think. He has assets he tried to hide. You deserve your share. You deserve respect. Those last words echoed the loudest. She got dressed quietly, careful not to wake Lily. Her daughter had fallen asleep clutching her stuffed rabbit, unaware that her entire future was being decided piece by fragile piece. Emily stood in the doorway and watched her breathe softly, a small reminder of why she had to be strong, even when she didn't feel strong at all. When she reached the kitchen, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. This is your husband's attorney. We will be filing additional motions today. Please confirm your attendance at next week's hearing. Emily stared at the message. It carried the same coldness Daniel had treated her with for months. The same dismissiveness. The same assumption that she would be unprepared, overwhelmed, unrepresented. She typed back only 2 words. Confirmed, attorney. She imagined Daniel reading that response. She imagined the flicker of confusion on his face as he realized she wasn't walking into court alone anymore. That the woman he had taken for granted, the one he thought he could steamroll now, had someone standing beside her. Someone very good. Later that morning, she met Mr. Grant at his office. It was much smaller than Daniel's attorney's firm no marble floors, no receptionists in perfectly tailored suits, but it felt warm, lived in, real. Books lined the walls, every surface was covered in case files, and a steaming mug of coffee sat on the edge of his desk. Ready? He asked, looking up over the rims of his glasses. No, Emily admitted, but I will be. That's good enough. He gestured for her to sit. Now let's talk strategy. He began by sliding a thin folder across the desk. Inside was a list of financial documents, bank statements, tax returns, investment records, all belonging to Daniel. Emily's heart kicked up. I didn't know he had half of these accounts, she whispered. He didn't want you to, Grant replied calmly. But you're married. You're entitled to full disclosure, and he failed to provide it voluntarily. Emily swallowed. Does this help us? It helps you, he corrected. A lot. He leaned back in his chair. Your husband thought this divorce would be quick and cheap. No lawyer for you, no complications. But hiding marital assets is a very serious complication. Emily felt something shift inside her, a slow burn of anger she'd kept buried under fear. He always made me feel like I was the one who depended on him, she murmured. Grant gave a single nod. Men like your husband often rely on that narrative, but the truth is, he depended on you just as much, maybe more, and the court will see that. He flipped open another folder. Now, we also need to address custody. A tremor of fear ran through her. He's trying to take Lily away from me. He filed for joint legal and physical custody, Grant said, but don't panic. He doesn't actually want her full time. He tapped the paper. This is a tactic, a threat, something to use against you so you'll accept a worse financial settlement. Emily's hand tightened into a fist in her lap. That's cruel. Divorce usually is, he replied, but it won't work. You're the primary caregiver. You've been responsible for Lily's school schedule, doctor visits, daily routine. We will make that clear. Emily felt her breath release in a long, shaky exhale. For the first time since the divorce began, she felt something close to hope. That evening, after putting Lily to bed, Emily sat at the kitchen table going through her own documents. Every receipt, every email, every message she'd exchanged with Daniel over the past year. Grant had asked her to gather anything that could help establish financial patterns or household responsibilities. She stopped when she reached an old photo. Daniel, holding Lily when she was a baby. Emily beside them, smiling wide, her eyes bright and full of a joy she barely recognized now. What happened? When did love turn into silence? When did the man who held her hand begin to treat her like a burden? She pressed the photo to her chest, feeling her throat tighten. She wasn't grieving the loss of him. She realized that now. She was grieving the loss of the woman she had been when she believed herself loved. But she was finding a new version of herself, shaken, yes, but waking up. Someone who could walk into a courtroom and say, I deserve better. Someone who could protect her daughter. Someone who could rebuild. She placed the photo aside, exhaled, and began organizing the documents with newfound determination. The next day, Emily received a call from Grant just as she finished dropping Lily off at kindergarten. Good timing, he said. Daniel's attorney filed the motions I expected. And they're weak. Very weak. Which means he's either confident you'll fold or he's panicking. Emily almost laughed. Daniel doesn't panic. Grant chuckled. Everyone panics when they realize the game isn't going their way. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel. Will the judge see through him? She asked. If he continues down this road, Grant said. Absolutely. And if he tries to play arrogant in court, which the type of man he is often does, it will only make our job easier. Emily felt a slow, steady strength building inside her, brick by brick. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't alone. And Daniel had no idea what was coming. The chapter ends with Emily arriving home, opening her front door and spotting an envelope slipped under the mat, her name written in Daniel's handwriting. She freezes, heart pounding, because she knows one thing. Whatever is inside will show exactly how desperate he's starting to become. Emily stood frozen on her front porch, the cold air brushing against her skin as she stared at the envelope lying at her feet. Her name was written in Daniel's hurried, unmistakably sharp handwriting letters that always looked like they were cut rather than written. For a long moment, she didn't move. Something about the way the envelope sat there felt wrong. Not dangerous, just meaningful. Like it carried a truth Daniel didn't want spoken aloud. She finally bent down, picked it up and stepped inside, locking the door behind her. The house was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of the heater. She set the envelope on the dining table, her hands trembling slightly. She had faced lawyers, humiliation, financial fear, and sleepless nights. But a handwritten message from Daniel that felt like an attack aimed directly at her heart. She sat. She inhaled. And then she opened it. Inside were 3 things: a typed letter, a printed bank statement, a sticky note with just 2 words: be reasonable. Emily stared at the note, a bitter laugh slipping from her chest. Reasonable? Now he wanted her to be reasonable? She pushed it aside and unfolded the letter. Emily, I'm aware you've hired an attorney. I find it unnecessary and hostile. We don't need to drag this through court. I'm offering you a fair settlement if you drop the false accusations about hidden assets. You and I both know you don't understand financial matters, and your lawyer is manipulating you for money. Sign the attached agreement and avoid embarrassing yourself in court. Emily read it twice. The arrogance, the condescension, the complete dismissal of her intelligence, and worst of all, his assumption that she was still the woman he could intimidate. She reached for the bank statement next. At first glance, it looked like a normal checking account summary, until her eyes caught the number at the bottom. A large withdrawal, made last week, to an account she had never heard of. Her breath caught. He had slipped. He had left a trail without realizing it. Grant had said they needed evidence that Daniel was shifting money around during the divorce. And here it was, hand-delivered by Daniel himself, in an act of panic disguised as confidence. Emily felt a strange, powerful calm wash over her. She wasn't scared anymore. Not of him, not of his lawyer, not of court. She took the documents and placed them neatly into a folder labeled, "For Grant." That afternoon, she met Grant in his office again. He was sipping coffee when she walked in, but one look at her expression made him set the mug down. "What happened?" She placed the envelope on his desk. "Daniel left that at my house." Grant raised an eyebrow and opened it. As he read the letter, his expression shifted from mild amusement to something like disbelief. "Well," he said dryly, "your husband is not as clever as he thinks." He held up the bank statement. This alone could significantly impact the judge's view of his honesty. Emily leaned forward. "Is it enough?" "It's more than enough," Grant assured. "Judges don't tolerate financial misconduct in divorce cases, and this," he tapped the page, "is a paper trail straight to the truth." Emily felt her shoulders relax, not because everything was solved, but because she finally understood something. Daniel had underestimated her so thoroughly, he had begun tripping over his own arrogance. Grant leaned back, hands folded. "This changes our approach. We'll present this at the hearing, and when the judge asks why he concealed the account, his reaction will tell us everything." Emily swallowed. "What kind of reaction do you expect?" "The kind that makes a courtroom go silent." A chill ran through her, not from fear but from clarity. Daniel was finally about to face consequences he had never imagined. That evening, as Emily cooked dinner, she noticed a shift inside herself. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't crying. She wasn't second-guessing every decision. She was steady. Lily ran into the kitchen laughing, waving a picture she drew at school. Emily knelt to hug her tightly, breathing in her daughter's warmth. For the first time in months, Emily didn't feel like she was hanging on by a thread. She felt anchored, because she wasn't just fighting for a divorce. She was fighting for truth, for respect, for a future where she no longer had to shrink to make someone else comfortable. And in 6 days, she would walk into that courtroom not as a victim, not as a desperate mother without a lawyer, but as a woman who finally understood her power. The hallway outside the family courtroom buzzed with low conversation and the rustling of documents. But for Emily, everything felt strangely muted. Her heartbeat was calm, steady, so unlike the terrified thudding she had imagined she would feel on this day. Maybe it was because she wasn't alone. Maybe it was because she finally knew the truth. Or maybe it was because Daniel's arrogance had finally begun to crack, and she had seen the first fractures. Grant walked beside her, holding his leather binder under one arm, his expression neutral but sharp. He was in full attorney mode now, focused, prepared, quietly fierce. "Remember," he told her gently, "you don't have to speak unless the judge asks you something directly. Let me handle everything else." Emily nodded. "I trust you." He gave her a small smile. "Good, because today, things are going to shift." They pushed open the courtroom doors. Daniel was already inside. He sat at the petitioner's table, dressed immaculately in a tailored navy suit, hair perfect, posture proud. But his eyes, those eyes that had once been warm, were cold and calculating as they landed on her. Then they flicked to Grant, and something flickered behind them. Surprise, annoyance, and for the first time, fear. Daniel leaned toward his attorney, whispering something sharply. His attorney shot a glance at Emily and Grant, frowned, and then whispered back. The tension at their table was visible, pulsing like a quiet electrical current. Emily took her seat. She felt Daniel staring at her, but she didn't look his way. Instead, she smoothed her skirt, inhaled slowly, and focused on Lily's tiny bracelet on her wrist, the one her daughter had given her that morning for good luck. Finally, the bailiff announced, "All rise." The judge entered, a woman with steely eyes and a no-nonsense presence that immediately commanded silence. Everyone rose, then sat again. Daniel's attorney stood first. "Your Honor, the petitioner moves to begin with our request for expedited settlement approval and joint custody." The judge lifted a hand, stopping him cold. "We will address all motions today. But first," she turned her gaze toward Daniel, "I will ask both parties whether full financial disclosures have been submitted." Grant rose slowly, calm and deliberate. "Your Honor," he said, "we have reason to believe the petitioner failed to disclose all marital assets." Daniel stiffened. His attorney's jaw twitched. The judge raised an eyebrow. "That is a serious allegation. What evidence do you have?" Grant opened his binder and pulled out the bank statement Daniel had delivered himself. Emily watched the color drain from Daniel's face. "This document," Grant said clearly, "shows a transfer of marital funds made during the divorce proceedings into an account not listed in the petitioner's financial disclosures. We received it directly from Mr. Walker." The judge turned to Daniel. "Is this accurate?" Daniel's lips parted, but no sound came out. His attorney scrambled. "Your Honor, this must be a misunderstanding. That account we intended to update the disclosures, but you did not," the judge finished sharply. "Mr. Walker, why was this account concealed from the court?" All eyes turned to Daniel. His throat bobbed. His gaze darted between Emily, the judge, and the document in Grant's hand. For the first time since this divorce began, he looked small. "Your Honor," he began, voice cracking faintly, "I wasn't trying to hide anything. I just wanted to keep certain funds separate for personal use." The courtroom fell silent. The judge's eyes hardened. "Mr. Walker, you do not get to decide what is separate. Marriage is a legal financial partnership. You were obligated to disclose all accounts." Daniel flushed. His fingers curled tightly on the table. Emily felt her breath catch, not out of fear, but out of realization. He truly believed he was untouchable, and now he was watching that illusion crumble. Grant stepped forward smoothly. "Your Honor, this pattern of withholding information significantly impacts our trust in the petitioner's filings. Given this, we request a full forensic review of all accounts, as well as temporary primary physical custody for my client during the investigation." Daniel's attorney shot up. "Your Honor, that is excessive." "No," the judge cut him off. "It is appropriate." Daniel inhaled sharply, chest rising in a silent panic. Emily sat still, hands folded, her heart steady. This was what truth looked like. The judge continued, "Until a full financial review is complete, I am granting temporary primary custody to Mrs. Walker. Furthermore, the petitioner is ordered to pay temporary support based on preliminary assessment." Daniel turned fully toward Emily now. Not angry, just stunned, as if he couldn't understand how she had slipped out of his control, as if he never imagined she would fight back, or win. Grant sat down beside her, whispering, "You did well." "I didn't do anything," she whispered back. "You had the courage to stand here," he said. "That is not nothing." When the hearing ended, Daniel approached her as the courtroom emptied. His steps were quick, almost frantic. "Emily," he hissed under his breath, "why are you doing this? We could have handled this privately." She met his gaze, the years of silence and belittlement finally melting into clarity. "You mean quietly," she said softly. "You wanted me quiet." His jaw clenched. "You think this is over?" he snapped. "You think you're going to win?" Emily stood straighter. "No," she said gently. "I think the truth is going to win." Daniel froze, because he felt it too. The shift, the end of his control, the beginning of a reckoning he never saw coming. Emily turned and walked out of the courtroom, the weight on her shoulders finally beginning to lift. Not because the battle was over, but because for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it anymore. She had a voice. She had proof. She had strength she never knew she possessed. And Daniel had just learned what it felt like to underestimate her. The weeks that followed the hearing felt like stepping into a new life, one careful piece at a time. Emily wasn't suddenly fearless or magically confident, but she was steady. She moved through each day with a quiet determination, grounded by the knowledge that the tide had finally turned. Grant kept her updated as the forensic review progressed. Each update revealed more of what Daniel had tried to hide: small withdrawals, obscure transfers, a second credit line, even a digital wallet he hoped no one would trace. Every revelation made one thing clear: Daniel hadn't believed she would ever be strong enough to challenge him. He believed wrong. The final court date arrived on a crisp Thursday morning. Emily woke before dawn, staring at the pale light stretching across her bedroom ceiling. This time, she didn't feel dread, or fear, or that hollow ache she used to feel when she thought about losing everything. Instead, she felt something she almost didn't recognize: peace. She dressed simply dark pants, a white blouse, hair pulled back, and looked at herself in the mirror. Her reflection wasn't the timid woman who once cried into her pillow, convinced she was powerless. She wasn't the woman who thought she'd crumble without Daniel's approval. No, she was the woman who survived, the woman who stood tall, the woman who refused to stay silent. She kissed Lily goodbye, leaving her in the neighbor's care, and drove to the courthouse with the calm of someone who had already won the most important battle, the one within herself. When she entered the courtroom, Daniel was already there, but he looked different. Not polished, not composed, not invincible, just tired. His eyes were puffy, his tie slightly crooked, his confidence cracked into pieces he no longer knew how to gather. His attorney leaned toward him, whispering urgently, but Daniel only stared at his hands. Emily sat beside Grant, her posture poised, her presence quiet but unshakable. When the judge entered, silence fell. The proceedings began swiftly. The forensic accountant presented the report page after page, documenting Daniel's concealed financial activity. Every hidden account, every suspicious transfer, every attempt to keep assets out of Emily's hands. Daniel flinched with each revelation, as if every sentence was a blow he never saw coming. And maybe that was true. He had always believed Emily would stay small so he could stay big. That belief had destroyed him more than any lawyer ever could. Finally, the judge lifted her gaze. "Mr. Walker, your pattern of concealment is extensive and troubling. Because of this, I am granting Mrs. Walker a substantially increased share of the marital assets." Daniel exhaled sharply, shoulders slumping. The judge continued. "Furthermore, Mrs. Walker will retain primary physical custody of the minor child. Visitation for the petitioner will be structured and supervised until further review." Emily's breath caught. Primary custody, security for Lily, stability, safety, everything she had fought for. A long silence stretched across the courtroom. Then the judge added one last blow. "And given the petitioner's deliberate attempts to misrepresent financial records, he is ordered to pay all legal fees incurred by the respondent." Daniel's head snapped up, his mouth opening in disbelief. He turned toward Emily like a drowning man begging for air. "You did this," he whispered hoarsely. Emily looked at him, not out of anger and not out of triumph, but with a calm truth he had never been able to face. "No," she said quietly, "you did this to yourself." And Daniel froze, because deep down he knew she was right. For the first time in their marriage, he had no one left to blame. Not the court, not the lawyer, not Emily, just himself. When the judge adjourned and people began gathering their papers, Emily rose slowly, feeling as if every step she took was lifting years of weight off her shoulders. Grant shook her hand warmly. "You were remarkable," he said. She smiled. "Thank you for everything." He nodded. "Now go enjoy your life. You earned it." Emily walked through the courthouse doors and stepped outside into the afternoon sun. The air felt crisp, fresh, almost new. She tilted her face upward, breathing it in. She wasn't broken. She wasn't abandoned. She wasn't powerless. She was free. Every bruise on her heart had become armor. Every tear had become strength. Every moment she was underestimated had become the fuel that carried her here. Her phone buzzed, a picture from Lilia smiling selfie with her stuffed rabbit. Emily laughed softly, tears warming her eyes for the first time in a long time. But these tears weren't from fear. They were from gratitude, from relief, from renewal. She typed back, "It's over, sweetheart. We're okay." And as she walked toward her car, sun on her skin, wind in her hair, and a future she finally believed she deserved unfolding ahead of her, Emily realized something beautiful. Daniel had gone to court expecting her to fall apart. Instead, he watched her rise, and that was a moment he would never forget.